our friendship just was almost like it somehow evaporated.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, we know it's because we had stopped investing in our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped doing the things that friends do to stay connected. And one of those things was maintaining that longing. Longing is a strong and persistent desire. And this is where I finally became adamant and persistent in my longing to connect with you, honey. And I may not have had a deep desire for you at that time because things were so painful.
Right.
But I did have a deep desire to stay together. I didn't want to just give up because things were hard. Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Well, hey there. Thanks so much for joining us. We are super glad you're here. But I want to ask you to stop listening right now. Okay, you heard me right. Stop listening. Because if you haven't already connected with us over on Facebook or Instagram, you need to head over there right now. Look up Blended Family Breakthrough and start following us. That way you won't miss anything. Now, of course, we want you to come back and start listening again. But on your way back, maybe leave us a rating or a review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. All right, let's hop into the episode, hon.
All right, let's do that. I'm wondering if you've identified your relationship style yet. Okay. Maybe you're not sure what the heck I'm talking about. And if that's the case, you might want to head back to last week's episode, number 176, and listen in so that you can identify if you're currently experiencing a vitalized, harmonious, conventional, conflicted, or devitalized relationship style.
Yeah. And remember, these aren't fixed, okay? They're not labels. They're actually fluid. And any couple can reach their desired relationship style simply by capitalizing on their strengths as a couple and shoring up their weaknesses as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one important aspect that can help you to move to the relationship style you really want is to experience friendship.
That's right. If you listened in last week and maybe you noticed that you're currently experiencing the vitalized or the harmonious style, that's great. And you can build on your strengths by continually focusing on how you're relating as friends and maintaining or growing that aspect as a couple. And the truth is that even if you identified your style as one of the others, maybe more conventional, conflicted, or devitalized, you can make amazing progress in your relationship by focusing on strengthening your friendship.
That's absolutely right. All the research says that in any romantic relationship, the friendship aspect matters. A while back, we did an episode called Friendship and Connection, or Friction and Distance. What's the state of your relationship? We're going to replay a portion of that today to remind you of some of the great strategies to help with maintaining or rekindling your friendship because it's so important. And unfortunately, it's kind of an aspect that many of us tend to underestimate or maybe even discount in marriage.
That's right. Now, before we dive into those tips, let's consider a couple of the deepest needs men and women have when it comes to romantic relationships, because this is important too.
Yeah, over the past several years, we've been helping nearly or newly blended couples prepare for their blend through a program that we've developed called Becoming Blended. And a portion of that process includes a Symbis assessment, which gives couples personal insight into their unique blend of personalities, priorities, and expectations. By the way, Symbis, it just stands for Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts.
Right.
Now, the results for each couple are based on their individual answers to the assessment questions. And within the survey, there's this one section that focuses on the differences between men and women.
The creators of Symbis, researchers and relationship experts Les and Leslie Parrott, say that understanding how those differences drive our deepest needs on top of our unique personalities can make or break a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
There's great value in exploring this.
Yeah, that's true. You know, when we personally took the Symbis assessment, here's what my results said around your deepest needs, honey.
Okay, let's hear it.
It says, as your wife, Kim needs to be cherished more than you think. In your dating relationship, you focused a lot on wooing Kim. Yeah, that's probably true. Research reveals that this fades once you're married because you become more focused on providing for her than cherishing her. And why does that matter? Because Kim will be more passionate and intimate with you when she feels cherished. So I'm wondering, does that resonate for you, honey?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so guys, pay attention. Your wife likely feels most loved when she's cherished by you.
Yeah, when she's feeling cherished.
Now, one definition of the word cherish is to protect and care for someone or something. So when you think about it, that's a part of genuine friendship.
Right.
Now, I know, guys, you probably don't use the word cherish to describe your friendships, right? But in those really close friendships, that's actually what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And who better to be best friends with than your wife?
Right.
The reality is best friends cherish each other, whether you use that word or not.
Right.
Okay.
And here's what my results said. As your husband, Mike needs more shared activity. As a dating couple, you enjoyed lots of shared activity. Research shows this tends to diminish once you marry. Husbands place a surprising importance on having their wife as a recreational companion. Why does this matter? Mike, more than you, connects emotionally by doing things together. Would you agree with that, honey?
Yeah, certainly. I do.
So I have to make a confession here. I've got to admit that friendship in marriage is something I've kind of dismissed in the past, or I haven't thought much about really. But when I heard the research around men's recreational needs, I had to reconsider the importance of friendship. Listen to this. No one plays as significant a role in meeting a man's unique needs as his wife. Researchers have identified his needs, but only his wife can truly satisfy them. I was kind of surprised that one of the top needs for men is to enjoy shared activity with their partner, but I do see how that plays out in our relationship and with other couples we know as well. So ladies, this is how your man connects with you. And since we're focused on friendship, isn't it true that friends enjoy doing things together? All kinds of things. And honey, would you say that one of your deepest needs is shared activity with me?
Oh, yeah, that's totally right.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that this one little section of the Symbis report isn't actually based on how couples answer the assessment questions.
Right.
So we've taken a whole bunch of couples through this Symbis, and the results of each couple's report look very different except for this section. It's the same for every couple, and that includes us as well.
And the couples don't know it at the time, but after we ask them how they feel about these statements around what women and men need most, they all agree wholeheartedly.
For sure, yeah.
The women all have a deep need to feel cherished, and the men all feel a deeper sense of connection with their partner while enjoying side-by-side activities. And when we tell them this isn't based on their answers, but it's based on extensive research, they find that really interesting too.
It is interesting. Absolutely. You know, we haven't had a couple yet who has disagreed with those statements.
No.
And the Parrots have been doing research for years that backs this up. So if we want to meet those deep needs for each other and cultivate friendship in our relationship, then we've just got to be intentional.
Right.
Friendship is something to be worked at and worked out. It takes time, it takes some energy, and of course it takes some effort.
So let's jump into our replay on friendship to explore a bit more, and hopefully you'll gain some new insight, some motivation, and practical strategies to strengthen this important aspect of your relationship. And maybe you'll discover something you can try out on Valentine's Day, which is right around the corner at the time that this episode is airing.
The Gottman Institute, which is a leading research group focused on marriage and relationship, they report having a strong friendship correlates with a positive perspective of the relationship. Now, they also say that it builds effective conflict management and a strong sense of us. What this implies is that when we've developed friendship in our relationship, it creates the kind of real connection that can help us to navigate all the ups and downs of life together.
Absolutely.
Right?
You know, a friend is someone you can laugh with and cry with. They're that person that's there for you when everything seems to be falling apart. They're able to empathize with your experience, to offer a listening ear, a reassuring hug, some kind words, encouragement, and practical support. A true friend knows you inside and out. They see all your flaws and your failures, and they love you anyway.
That's right.
They don't run away when things get hard, but they remain by your side as a constant presence through thick and thin.
Yeah, a friend is someone who's willing to wade through the messiness of life alongside you, right? They're kind of in the trenches with you. They're also there to celebrate the wins with you. Friends enjoy time simply hanging out together, doing kind of nothing. They play together, travel together, they seek adventure together. They do all of life together, the good, the bad, the joyful, and the really challenging pieces too.
Yeah, and isn't that what we all want in our marriage? So take a moment to just stop and think about what a stronger friendship might look like in your relationship. And how would that impact your ability to stay connected and cope with all the stress and those inevitable bumps in the road, right?
That's right. The reality for all of us is that we're going to experience tough stuff in life as individuals, as a couple, as a blended family. But if you've got a solid foundation of friendship in your marriage, you're going to be in a much better place to weather the storms of life and team up to remain connected, even when you're experiencing pain, uncertainty, chaos, or even conflict.
So, yes, absolutely. Friendship is important in marriage, but it can also be challenging for spouses to maintain a solid friendship when they feel more like roommates or business partners or even battling foes.
Yeah.
You know, it's common for couples to get high-centered on, managing all the logistics of family life, and they get caught up in conflict when things don't go as expected. When we tend to focus on what's not going well, it's easy for the communication between us to slide into, those sharp jabs, those words of criticism or even contempt. We might jump into a defensive stance or avoid and stonewall each other.
Absolutely. And, isn't it funny how we're talking about friendship and I've got, these different buddies that I have in my life, and sometimes we disagree on stuff. Sometimes, our friendship has tension in it. And yet I find it within me to speak to them pretty respectfully, and I can be somewhat kind, and I can kind of negotiate with them and all of that. But how many times over the years have you and I gotten in a conflict and I'm not respectful and I'm not kind and I don't negotiate well and I just get selfish and focused on me? Like, wow, like you're even closer than those buddies are. Why would I not be investing in that type of interaction?
I'll shut down and walk away and avoid.
Yeah, totally. And then when we get stuck in these patterns of unhealthy communication, it's difficult, maybe even impossible to grow and maintain a healthy friendship. So it's kind of reciprocal here. Like the friendship builds good communication, but good communication can help build friendship as well. Back in episode 59, we talked about the 4 conflict communication patterns that are hurtful and toxic to your relationship. And we examined John Gottman's 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And if these toxic patterns have emerged in your relationship, I want to really encourage you to check out that episode, which also explores how you can break free from those patterns by using what Gottman calls the antidotes. And so we'll put a link in the show notes for you to do that, because if communication is toxic and we're treating each other like foes, our sense of connection is going to break down, and certainly our friendship is going to suffer. Yeah.
And this is where we were stuck all those years ago, honey.
Yeah.
We had been treating each other as foes for quite a while, rather than investing in growing our friendship. And we had some unhealthy patterns of communication between us and a lot of unresolved issues.
Sure.
And I think we both realized that it's really hard to even have a desire or a motivation to focus on our friendship when we've got all this other stuff weighing us down, and when we view each other as foes, when we're actually think of each other as the enemy.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And if you're listening today and that's where you and your partner are stuck, we want to encourage you to reach out for support, right? You probably need some support. We eventually got professional support to work through our tough emotions and resolve some issues. And that made a big difference for us. It was a combination of mentorship as well as counseling, and that really helped us. And you know, coaching, counseling, mentorship, there's a place for that in our relationships.
Absolutely.
And so don't be afraid to really reach out for help.
Yeah.
But we also intentionally worked on reestablishing our friendship along the way.
Yeah.
This was why I was so adamant about continuing our date nights, even when date nights weren't very much fun. And we actually had quite a few that were just plain old uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
But we'd hit a point where we were either going to throw in the towel and give up on our relationship, or we were going to get intentional about saving it. And working on friendship was a big piece of the intentionality.
Yeah. And honestly, I was pretty skeptical that we even could be friends again after everything we'd been through and all the pain we'd been experiencing.
Yep.
It didn't seem very realistic to me. But I also didn't want to give up on our marriage and our family, so I was willing to at least give it a try. So even though I dreaded going out and spending time with you, honey, which is really sad to say.
It is sad. I mean, we chuckle about it now, but it is pretty sad.
That's where we were. Even though I dreaded it, I forced myself to get ready and go out on date nights.
Yeah.
And I remember there was one date night during this really difficult season. We were at a restaurant and I just sat at the table and I just remember tears streaming down my face. It was so hard.
Pretty silent. That was over at Luna's Cafe in Bellingham, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that's such a, Luna's is such a sweet romantic spot. But I couldn't enjoy myself, and I don't think we spoke much to each other that whole night because we were both really hurting.
That's true. But we didn't just say, oh, well, forget it, date nights are out, because we were struggling.
Right.
You know, it was hard to enjoy each other's company, and it was just a tough time.
It was.
But we persevered and we found ways to connect and gradually regain our friendship.
It took work.
Yeah, it did. We still do go to Luna's Cafe. In fact, we went there recently, and it's one of our favorite date night destinations.
Yeah.
But now we're able to relax, laugh together, we share openly, and enjoy each other's company.
That's right, but only because we got intentional about reestablishing our friendship and we pushed through the uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
And we also got support and learned how to communicate better. Now, friendship is just one piece of the puzzle, like we've mentioned, but it's an important piece if you want to truly experience connection, satisfaction, and enjoyment in your marriage. So let's talk about some practical ways to grow and maintain friendship in your relationship. And these are things we did. If you want to establish friendship, and if this is where you're at and you're really struggling, we've got some ideas.
Yeah, let's just focus on a couple of primary things. First, let's talk about what it's like to move from what we call vagueness to vulnerability. Often when we're hurting, we might just naturally tend to shut down or clam up, kind of turn inward. We might not feel safe to openly share what's really going on inside. Like if our friendship is disrupted, I'm not ready to be like, hey, I think I want to bare my soul to you, right? or we might feel compelled to actually disengage, like purposely pull away.
Yeah.
And that's when we start becoming really vague in the way that we communicate and relate with our spouse. We're kind of emotionally unavailable. We aren't showing up. We're not really being genuine in a way that engages each other in the middle of the tough stuff that we're experiencing.
And this is how I tend to cope with pain. At least that was my pattern in the past. But I've learned over the years that true friendship requires vulnerability. You know, a real friend always lets you in, and they're transparent and honest with you. Now, at this point, years later, I'm able to acknowledge all the benefits of vulnerability. It really is a healthy release valve to authentically be who you are.
Yeah.
Now, when I choose to be vulnerable with you, honey, I don't have to pretend to be someone or something that I'm not.
Right.
I can be real with you even in my struggle and still be acceptable and loved by you.
That's right. Yeah. And when you're able to open up and kind of let me into whatever's going on, your pain or your struggle or whatever it is, then I'm able to extend a bit more empathy and understanding for what you're going through. I don't have to guess what's going on or try to read your mind. That's kind of a futile endeavor anyway.
Yeah.
But your ability to be more vulnerable over the years has actually drawn me closer to you. And then I feel more safe to open up and be vulnerable with you as well.
Right. It's just so freeing to simply be who you are and to share exactly where you're at emotionally, even if that's in a really ugly place.
Yeah.
And that's just one benefit of vulnerability, because you really can't achieve true friendship without being fully known. Another benefit is that vulnerability builds trust.
Yeah. It's really a trustworthy act. The more I know you, the more I can trust you. You know, in our early years when you were kind of more in a pattern of shutting down on me when things were hard and I was trying to understand and relate to you, it was really frustrating because things felt vague to me. You were emotionally unavailable. I wasn't really sure if you were a trustworthy person when it came to navigating all the challenges we had together. And sometimes you went along with things just to appease me or to avoid conflict. But then later it would come out that you didn't truly agree with my perspective at all. You were, you know, kind of just going, oh, well, you do whatever you want. But then later, you would abdicate. You're right. Then you'd get resentful because you weren't being heard.
Right. It was a vicious cycle.
It was, yeah. But that would lead me to start to question you. I never knew if you were being really honest with me about your true feelings or if you were just trying to avoid an issue by telling me, you know, what you thought I wanted to hear rather than what you really felt. But when you started being more consistently vulnerable and real with me, I started going, okay, I don't have to guess where Kim's at anymore. And then that meant trust grew over time. Now I have a tremendous amount of trust in you. And so much of that is because of you learning how to be vulnerable with me.
Right. And as it turns out, trust is critical in marriage.
Who figured? Who would know? Yeah.
Hand in hand with vulnerability. They're both important, especially if you want to build and maintain a healthy friendship.
Yeah.
But, you know, vulnerability can be really hard. I know this because I struggled with this for years. And I really tried to hide my true self because I was afraid. I didn't know if I would be acceptable.
Yeah.
But I can't say enough about the value of vulnerability and staying emotionally connected to your spouse, even when your emotions are raw or they feel really awful. You can choose to be more transparent and open. And, you know, you might be pleasantly surprised at how freeing this can be and how much more connection and friendship you're going to enjoy in your relationship when you can be vulnerable.
For sure. You know, earlier I talked about a woman's need to feel cherished in the relationship. And this is highly tied to vulnerability. You know, guys, most of us, when we have these discussions around vulnerability, it's like, oh goodness, here we go. It's the feelings talk, right? We got to talk about our feelings, and I get it. It's hard, and we don't
Some
like
men,
to
not
talk
all
about.
men. You love
I
to
know.
talk about your feelings.
I just jabber on and on about all kinds of things, right?
I'm the one that doesn't want to talk about feelings.
Well,
so.
it is true, but you know, the research shows in general that need to feel cherished is actually tied to this idea of vulnerability,
Right?
because to be known and still be loved in imperfection and all of that, that is a sense of being cherished. And, the roughest guy might be listening right now. And you know what? At the heart, at the core of it, he probably needs to feel cherished too.
Right.
And this mutual vulnerability that actually grows friendship and talks about real life, difficult stuff, it builds that sense of being cherished on both sides. But women definitely need to feel cherished. My guess is when I am vulnerable with my heart and really honest with you about what's going on inside, I'm guessing that you actually feel cherished because I'm revealing myself to you. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then the flip side, there's times where I get genuinely curious about, hey, what's really going on inside of you? And I would be willing to bet in those moments you also feel cherished.
Yes, that's true.
Absolutely. So when we have this mutual vulnerability, it starts to grow that sense of being cherished, and all of that builds our friendship.
Exactly.
Yeah. So think about how you might move from being vague to being more vulnerable. And if you want to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this, you can check out episode 98, titled, Is Fear of Being Vulnerable Keeping You from Loving Your Spouse Wholeheartedly? This is all connected, right?
Yep.
And we'll put a link in the show notes to that, as well as episode 129. That one's called, What Does It Take to Build and Maintain Trust in Your Relationship? So you can go check those out and do a little bit deeper dive on vulnerability and trust.
Absolutely. So make an intentional effort to move away from being vague and to be more vulnerable with your spouse.
Right now?
Anytime.
Oh, I thought I was going to be...
Do you have something to share?
I don't know. How long do we have on this episode?
You do like to share.
Maybe we better just move on.
No, we need to keep going. Yeah. So our next tip is to move from logistics to longing. Now, we all start out in our relationship with this deep sense of longing.
Sure.
We long to understand each other and to connect in a meaningful way. We ask lots of questions to get to know each other, and we're eager to answer those questions and even elaborate on things like our childhoods and where we've been in the past, what we've experienced, and where we're at in this season of life, right? We love to share.
Yep.
We share our hopes and our dreams for the future, and we never seem to run out of things to talk about as we continually make those heart-to-heart connections that tend to come pretty naturally in those early days of dating and romance.
Yeah,
right?
It feels like we don't have to work at it. We just talk for hours and hours on the phone. So we find ways to connect and communicate. We start anticipating the next time that we're going to be together. We talk and share more and more with each other. And we experience that magical kind of connection where we just, know each other. We might even tell our friends that our new partner really gets us, right? And we certainly you and I experienced that in the early days of our relationship, hon.
Right.
And just about every couple we know describes how they started out with a deep interest in each other and a sense of longing. And they talk about that friendship that they experienced in the beginning and how the friendship emerged into romance. And that was a big part of our story too, right? And that friendship and deep sense of connection is what keeps couples moving forward with the relationship. Like if none of that was happening, you probably wouldn't have kept going.
No.
So this seems to be a pretty common experience for most of us.
Yeah. But somewhere along the way, once our relationship is more established and we've moved everyone under the same roof, that's when things can start to shift.
Oh, yeah.
Our interactions become more about the logistics of daily life more than anything else. Have you paid the credit card bill? Don't forget to take the meat out of the freezer for dinner. Are you going to pick up the kids from practice? Did you change the appointment with the orthodontist? Can you iron my shirts? Will you restock the pantry or put gas in the car or fold the laundry that's been sitting in the dryer, and so on and so on and so on?
Man, you just sound so fun with all that. Like, I want to be your friend there.
Oh, yes. I'm just a joy to be around.
Communicating about household logistics, it's necessary. But sometimes we find ourselves focused more on the logistics than we do on growing and maintaining our relationship.
Right.
And that's when we can just start to feel more like business partners or roommates than real friends and romantic partners. And sadly, this is when couples wake up in the morning and they feel like they don't even know the person sleeping next to them anymore. They've drifted apart. The longing that they once had for each other has been replaced with the busyness and the logistics of life.
Yeah, and we experienced this as well, honey,
Oh, yeah.
especially during our season in the family courts with my ex-spouse. We were both highly focused on upcoming meetings with the lawyer and therapist and guardian ad litem and preparing for court dates with declarations and all the paperwork we had to gather. We also had to discuss how to manage all the relational tensions going on in our home and between the two homes. And while all of this was necessary in order to protect my parental rights and advocate for my daughter's well-being, unfortunately, we did not do a good job of safeguarding our marriage during that tough season. And even beyond that season, when Annika was then making a lot of poor choices, and we didn't always agree on how to respond and parent her.
Yeah, we were in the battle trenches together. We were doing our best to support each other through it, but our communication was highly focused on what was going on logistically with the legal case and the struggles that we were navigating with Annika and your ex. And all that was on top of all the regular realities of life and work and maintaining the household and raising our two mutual children who were pretty young at the time. There was no shortage of logistics for us.
No.
And through all of that, we certainly weren't focused on us.
No.
Friendship was not a priority.
No.
We were basically in survival mode. We were united in a common goal. We did have that because we were kind of agreeing on needing to fight this battle. But everything other than that was running on empty, especially our friendship.
Yeah. And, you know, by the time that this challenging season was over and we kind of opened our eyes and realized how depleted our relationship had become, it was almost too late for us.
Yeah,
we were on the verge of calling it quits because we felt so disconnected. We were still living under one roof together, but we each felt very much alone at that point in our marriage.
Yeah, I totally agree. And at times it felt that we were foes. We said that earlier rather than friends.
Yeah.
Our friendship just was almost like it somehow evaporated.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, we know it's because we had stopped investing in our friendship. We stopped doing the things that friends do to stay connected. And one of those things was maintaining that longing. You know, longing is a strong and persistent desire. And this is where I finally became adamant and persistent in my longing to connect with you, honey. And I may not have had a deep desire for you at that time because things were so painful.
Right.
But I did have a deep desire to stay together. And I didn't want to just give up because things were hard.
Yeah, and even though I dreaded those date nights that you insisted on, and I didn't feel connected to you at the time, I'm so grateful now that you were able to tap into your longing to save our relationship and to rebuild our friendship. And let's just share what that actually looked like in the beginning, honey.
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting because even when I think about that whole season, we never really stopped doing date night, even as we were leading into that season. But the problem was we kind of replaced that time from that longing with logistics.
Right.
Technically, we went out on date nights during those 3 years, but all we talked about was guardian ad litems and lawyers and Annika and then, did you get the shopping done? Like all that list of different things you were just running through. It was like a million times. Yeah, it was a logistical date night. So it wasn't really a date night. I mean, we were present. We maybe had a bite to eat and possibly we went to a movie afterward.
But we weren't connecting.
But there was no connection. We pretty much just sat in silence later. Right. So we get through this season, everything's about logistics. And then we wake up one day and go, I don't even know you. So now date night just goes quiet.
Yeah. So awkward.
Yeah. Like you shared earlier, sometimes there'd be tears right there at the table in the restaurant. I feel bad for the people who had to serve us in that season because we were a mess.
We had very sad faces.
Absolutely. I think we were both grieving the loss of our connection. There was a lot to grieve, but I think we both were like, what happened?
Yeah,
like we used to really enjoy each other, and we really didn't know what it was going to take to get some of that back.
Right.
But for a while there, we kind of relied on that book of conversation starters. Remember?
Yeah.
It sounds really silly to do that, but we got to a point where we realized we just don't even have a way to start a conversation with each other. So let's just get this stupid book and answer some stupid questions, and let's see, see if it actually does something.
It was a good jumping off point for us.
It was, yeah. We would flip through the pages and we'd ask each other, crazy, silly questions like, if you could go anywhere in the universe on a rocket ship, where would you go? And I remember you used to roll your eyes, and I just like, all right, I guess I'll answer this, and then you would kind of warm up, and we would move along. And it seemed weird, this kind of random questions. But it kind of helped us to get past the awkwardness, or maybe it presented a new kind of awkwardness to force us past the old awkwardness and just start opening up to each other again. And sometimes we even ended up laughing because we were like, well, that actually was pretty funny, right? Just the way that we would respond to these wacky questions.
Yeah. Some of our answers were pretty out there. But really what that book of conversation starters did was it created an atmosphere of new longing that could emerge between us.
Yeah.
We started to tell each other stories about ourselves that we'd never shared before. And we slowly began longing to know and understand each other again, little by little.
Yeah.
And, it didn't happen after just a few date nights. It really did take some time and patience, especially since we were still having to talk about our challenging logistics at home, raising 3 kids. But we chose not to do that on date night. We actually set some boundaries around what we would talk about on date night and what we wouldn't talk about on date night. And that's really important as well.
Totally. Yeah. It's not about just physically showing up.
Right.
It's about what do you do to engage while you're there. And then over time, we were able to find a more healthy balance between the logistics and the longing.
Right.
We intentionally took time to cultivate our friendship by asking each other questions, getting curious. We got out of the conversation starter books and started asking real questions, right? We started sharing stories with each other, making new discoveries about each other. And that process really helped to save our marriage. We were patient, we stayed committed, and we were able to revitalize that friendship. And now 10 years later, I would say our friendship piece of our marriage is stronger than it's ever been.
Yes. And, we're still intentionally growing our friendship in this way. It's not a one and done thing. This is ongoing.
Yeah.
Just last weekend, we were out on one of our day dates, which we like to do. We were hanging out under a big willow tree, drinking coffee before we headed in to see a movie. And I just mentioned how the willow tree was like a big igloo.
Yeah, it was like kind of surrounding us.
Yeah, it was cool. And then I learned something new about your childhood, honey, that I didn't know before. When you started sharing a story, that me commenting on the willow tree kind of triggered a story for you of how at your grandparents' old house, they had these 2 big grapefruit trees in the front yard. And your papa groomed these trees to be like a big igloo. And you and your siblings would hide under that tree and play under its cover. And you even had a picnic table under there, which I was like, no way. That's so cool.
It was great shade in the Phoenix sunshine.
And I'd never heard that story before. How you'd work as a team to clean up all the rotten grapefruits to keep your igloo fort neat and tidy. I'd never heard all of that.
So many rotten grapefruits. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Sometimes I think we tend to believe that we already know everything there is to know about our spouse, especially after a number of years, right? Or that they already know everything about us. And so we kind of stop asking questions and maybe even stop sharing our stories.
Right.
But the reality is there's more to learn. That is simply a lie that isn't true.
Right.
Even after 21 years of marriage, we're still discovering things that we didn't know about each other. And because we're always changing and growing as people, we need to maintain our longing toward knowing and discovering where each other is emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually.
That's right. There's always something we can learn about our spouse when we truly long to connect. We want to balance the logistics of life with a genuine longing to build and maintain our friendship. And to do that, we must be intentional and take time to make a heart-to-heart connection on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And if you want a little more insight around how to apply the simple skills of asking good questions and telling each other stories in your relationship, we've put a link in the show notes to an article from the Gottman Institute called F is for Friendship.
Yeah,
It's kind of insightful.
That's so good. You know, I wonder if we go all the way back to kind of the beginning here, where we talked about one of the big needs for men is about this shared experience, shared activity together. You know, I think it's interesting because we can actually plug that thought into this whole idea of logistics and actually use the logistics that we have to navigate in order to create that opportunity for us to connect through shared experience. And you use that word intentional.
Right.
And I think that's key to all of this. It's actually part of the logistics to say, how do we, in the midst of all these other things that we're managing and we're business partners around, let's add one little thing to be business partners in there, and that is to actually escalate the regular date nights. And in those date nights, let's do some activity.
Yeah, right? Get it on the schedule.
Absolutely. And ladies, I bet I would challenge you to give this a try. Find a way to plug in a date night here and there that has to do with some sort of an activity that your husband really enjoys connecting with you through that. And then watch what happens to the conversation after the activity's over.
Yeah, I just did that recently when I took you to the car show.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you surprised me with that.
I don't particularly like to wander around car shows, but I love to watch you talk about the cars and notice all the cool stuff. And we did have a great day after that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, there's kind of a connection here between this whole logistics and longing. And if we can make it part of our priority to get these date nights on there, have activity, that can actually begin to grow our longing, right? But it's not just about date nights. It also means connecting on a daily basis.
Right.
Even if it's just for about 10 minutes to check in with what each other has experienced, maybe make some sort of a heart-to-heart connection.
Right.
And here's my challenge for you on a daily basis. Get rid of the, how was your day, honey? Oh, it was fine. Get rid of that. Challenge yourself not to say it was fine anymore. Say a little bit more, share a little bit more of your heart. Go back to, rather than being vague, be vulnerable about what was going on, but also tie this together and set aside 10 minutes to sit down on the couch and turn off all the devices and tell the kids, hey, we just need 10 minutes.
Yeah, get rid of the distractions.
And then, you know, we also need some extended time together once in a while.
Right.
Might be an overnight or just a weekend here and there. And choose to make that a top priority to really spend focused time together. Time that doesn't involve logistics or problem solving, but that's just quality time to connect and build your friendship.
That's right. And spending quality time together is one important aspect of friendship, right? Friends do things together and focus on each other.
That's right.
Another aspect of friendship is that we enjoy ourselves. We have fun, laugh, and explore together. And like I said earlier, ladies, spending time doing things with your spouse is something they need.
Yeah.
They need to go on adventures with us.
Yeah. Friends also share a fondness and an admiration for one another, right? They acknowledge each other's positive traits and characteristics. They're proud of each other's accomplishments. They give specific compliments. They show gratitude toward each other. And remember, guys, women need to feel cherished. Genuine words of affirmation and appreciation are going to help her to know that she's special.
That's right. And you know, friends know how special they are to each other because of their investment into the relationship. As mutual respect and trust is cultivated, commitment grows.
For sure.
Friends know they can count on each other when tough times come along, and they've got an empathetic shoulder to lean on or even cry on sometimes. And for couples, Having a secure friendship correlates with a positive perspective of the relationship and a strong sense of usness. Like we said earlier, it's so important.
Yeah, you know, when things get tough, even when you're feeling frustrated, you might just ask yourself, what does it look like to just be a good friend right now? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And if you've been struggling to maintain a friendship in your relationship, or if it feels like your spouse is more of a foe than a friend, it's our hope that today's discussion and understanding the importance of that strong friendship is going to motivate you to take some action and work on befriending your partner all over again, to revitalize your friendship and connection by investing in your relationship. Yeah. It's going to help you stay connected in the long run when the kids are, home for visitation and there's chaos all around you, or when you get to empty nest stage and there aren't any kids. You don't want to be looking at each other going, who are you?
Yeah.
Like you really want to be able to stay united, and you can stay united and reduce the tension and the conflict in the midst of all of that. And you're playing the long game.
Yep.
Building a solid friendship is going to help you to move away from feeling like your roommates or business partners. And as a byproduct, it'll actually supercharge your passion and your intimacy as well.
Absolutely.
And I know for a lot of us guys, that's really important. So I would encourage you to think about that, but that's for another podcast episode. Now, we know that all of this is possible. We really do at a very personal level.
Yep.
Because we've done it ourselves.
Yep, we've been there.
But it does take intentionality, it takes patience, it takes persistence, and a desire to succeed and make it to the other side. I just have to say, don't hear us say that if things are so bad that like as soon as you look at each other, you're both already at a level 8 out of 10 and in your emotional activation and you're just, exploding in these big fights, to say, well, we have to do date night anyway and let's just go end in ruin every single time we go out. Don't hear us say that this is like don't hear us say that this is a rule that you have to do this in every season, every moment. Okay. Sometimes this needs to be paired with professional support.
Right.
Counseling might be really important. Coaching might be really important. Finding a mentor to help you to figure out the actual practical ways that you're not going to let these date nights get out of hand if you're really trying to build some regular rhythm to your date nights. So please don't hear us say, just force date nights and everything will be okay. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah, but we are saying to be willing to try something new.
Absolutely.
Don't stay stuck.
That's right.
Maybe it's something that we did talk about today, or maybe you just need to get creative around how you spend time together. You might want to check out some of the resources offered by the Gottman Institute. They are the leading experts on healthy relationships. Their stuff is great.
Ton of research, yeah.
And one of their books looks really interesting to me. In fact, we just ordered it. We're about to start it. It's called 8 Dates. And the tagline reads, Essential Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. I really like that because no matter how long you've been married or how strong your relationship is, there's always room for something new to help you get even better.
That's right.
Right? To grow and maintain friendship is a lifelong adventure. So if that book sounds interesting to you too, like it does to us, check out the link in the show notes to learn more about it.
That's right. So move from vague to vulnerable, move from logistics to longing, and be intentional about the way you're building your friendship. I promise you the payoff is so worth it. We're in a season of 21 years in our marriage now where we're getting to live that.
Yeah, we actually enjoy being together now. It's so amazing.
Hey, thanks for spending this time with us today. We hope that you gained some new insights, some new motivation, and some practical strategies as well so that you can cultivate friendship in your relationship. And if you'd like to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of the topics that we've touched on today, we've put links in the show notes to resources and additional episodes that might bring some value. So make sure you check those out.
That's right. We encourage you to keep learning and to keep growing. Next week, our Simple Step bonus content will air the day before Valentine's Day, and we'll be exploring different ways to meet those deepest needs we all have as men and women. Ladies, how can you engage more in shared activities with your husband? maybe even this year for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, and guys, how can you show your wife that she's cherished? These intentional efforts are going to help you to grow your friendship and lead to more passion, intimacy, and emotional connection in your relationship. Not just on a special occasion like Valentine's Day, but every day beyond.
Right.
And by the way, you'll need to follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app for access to our Simple Step episodes. You really don't want to miss out on those. But for now, that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.